Imagine for a second that your entire world has just been shattered. I mean, your home is gone, your people have been dragged into exile, and everything you've ever believed in is now totally up for grabs. Well, that's the world of the Book of Ezekiel. It is one of the most vivid and dramatic stories you'll ever find, a story born out of absolute crisis, filled with some really harsh judgment, but, and this is the key, it's ultimately a story of incredible, mind-blowing hope. Really, at its heart, the book is asking a question that I think we can all connect with. What do you do? How do you find any shred of hope when your world has completely fallen apart? So that's the question we're going to keep in mind as we dive into this amazing story of a people trying to pick up the pieces of a shattered reality. All right, so to really get this book, we've got to start with the prophet himself, Ezekiel. He's a man who's right in the middle of his people's most desperate moment. Okay, let's set the scene. The year is 597 BC. Ezekiel, who's a priest, gets ripped from his home in Jerusalem and deported to Babylon. So now he's in exile, living by this place called the Kibar River, and his whole world has just been stripped away. And then, 5 years into this totally bleak new life, something completely unexpected happens. You see, his mission as a prophet doesn't start with some quiet, gentle whisper. No way. It begins with this shocking, absolutely otherworldly vision that just shatters his entire understanding of God's presence and power.
It starts out as this huge, churning storm cloud, just flashing with fire.
And then out of the fire come these 4 incredible, bizarre living creatures. They're meant to represent all of creation. And next to them are these wheels inside of other wheels, and they're covered in eyes, moving in any direction they want. The message here is just stunning. God isn't trapped in a temple back in Jerusalem. No, he's mobile. He's in charge, and he is right there with his people, even in the middle of pagan Babylon. So God gives Ezekiel a very specific job description. He calls him a watchman. Now, what does that mean? Well, his job is to shout out God's warnings. But here's the crucial part. It's not his responsibility to force people to listen. His only job is to be faithful and actually speak the truth, whether they like it or not. So, how do you get the attention of a people who have just tuned everything out? Well, Ezekiel's ministry enters this totally new phase. God commands him to perform these really dramatic, symbolic acts. Think of them as living parables, designed to shock people with some very harsh truths. Now look, these weren't just weird performances. Each one was like a gut punch of a message. I mean, he lies on his side for over a year, literally embodying the crushing weight of the nation's sin. He builds this little clay model of Jerusalem and then acts out a siege against it, prophesying the city's doom. And then he shaves his head and his beard and divides up the hair to show exactly what's going to happen to the people. This was basically street theater with the highest stakes imaginable. And all of this builds to what might be the single most heartbreaking moment in the entire book. It's a vision that represents the absolute rock-bottom moment for the nation. Ezekiel sees that brilliant fiery presence of God, the same glory he saw by the river, and he watches it physically leave the temple in Jerusalem. It is a devastating symbol. It means that because of how the people had acted, God was pulling his presence out of a place that just didn't honor him anymore. So for the entire first half of the book, Ezekiel's message is just unrelenting judgment. It's tough stuff. And then everything changes. A messenger finally arrives with the news everyone feared. Jerusalem has fallen. The temple has been destroyed. And right there, with that final awful confirmation, Ezekiel's message does a complete 180. It shifts from judgment to a future that's all about hope. And this new message of hope is captured in what has to be one of the most powerful and iconic visions in all of literature. I'm talking about the Valley of Dry Bones. God basically transports Ezekiel and drops him in the middle of a valley that is just littered with bones. And they're not just dead, they're dry, super dry, which means hope has been gone for a long, long time. It is the perfect picture of Israel, a nation that is spiritually and politically, for all intents and purposes, dead. And then God asks this impossible question, Son of man, can these bones live? And the question just hangs there in the air, because of course the obvious answer is, no way. It's a reminder of just how hopeless the situation really is. So what happens next is this roadmap to new life. God tells Ezekiel to speak to the bones, and as he does, this incredible rattling sound fills the valley as all the bones start coming back together, forming skeletons. Then muscle and skin cover them, but they're still just lifeless bodies.
The final, most crucial step is when God himself breathes his own spirit into them. And then they stand up on their feet, a vast, living army. It's this powerful symbol that real restoration isn't a human project. It's a supernatural act of God.
You see, this whole vision gets to the absolute core promise of the book. The problem for Israel wasn't just political exile, it was a heart problem. And God's solution isn't just bringing them back home, it's performing a kind of spiritual heart transplant, giving them a totally new spirit and a new desire to actually follow him. Okay, and all of this builds to the book's final, ultimate promise. This is the grand finale, the resolution that brings the whole story of exile and return full circle. The book wraps up with this long, incredibly detailed vision of a new, perfect temple. But it's not just about rebuilding a building. It's about restoring worship, and more importantly, God's relationship with his people. And from this new temple, a river flows out that brings life and healing to the entire land. The very last words of the entire book are the new name for the city of Jerusalem. It's Yahweh Shammah, which means the Lord is there. That's the ultimate hope. Remember the glory that left the old temple? Well, it is now returned, forever, to live among his people. When you think about it, the Book of Ezekiel really takes us on a journey. We go from a God who seems tied to a building, to a God who is mobile and can be anywhere, to finally realizing that God's presence itself is the ultimate promise. And so it leaves us with this huge question to chew on. What does it mean for us to find God's presence, not in a physical place, but in the promise that he is with us?
Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. It really helps us.